episode of Crippled by Culture, where we talk about everything in life and relate it to the disabled and chronically ill community. My name is Sean Gold, and I'm an author, advocate, and nonverbal public speaker for the disability community. To provide a quick visual description for accessibility, I am a Black man with a white tracheostomy breathing tube in my neck. I am wearing a black shirt. The person off camera who you hear speaking for me, the video is of a Zoom call with me and the person talking for me off camera, and my guest is in the other box next to it. Before we jump in, I want to give a quick shout out to Brandon Lingle for being my voice transcriber for this episode. Thank you so much. Today, we're talking about the intersections of disability and queer creative writing, and I'm really excited for this one. So let's get into it and meet today's awesome guests. Jonathan Parks-Ramage is the author of the new book, It's Not the End of the World, which has been hailed by the Los Angeles Times as a wild ride of a novel and selected by the New York Times Style magazine as a pick for Best Queer Summer Fiction. His debut novel, Yes Daddy, was named one of the best queer books of 2021 by Entertainment Weekly, NBC News, The Advocate, Lambda Literary, Bustle, Goodreads, and more. He is co-creator of the Off-Broadway musical The BIG GAY Jamboree, which was nominated for 5 Lucille Lortel Awards, 4 Drama Desk Awards, and 3 Outer Critics Circle Awards. Jonathan, thank you for being here today. How are you doing? Would you mind giving us a visual description of yourself, please?
Yes, hi. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me on. I am a white man who is wearing big, dark glasses, and just a cute and simple black sweater. That's about it.
Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate that. First, do you identify as having a disability or a chronic illness? If so, would you mind sharing what disability or chronic illnesses you have?
I do not identify as having a disability or chronic illness, though I am in a romantic relationship with someone who has cerebral palsy. So disability is always something that, is on my mind and talking about frequently in our household.
And what made you consider having an advocacy career involving the disability community?
I mean, sure. I mean, I don't know if I'm as much of an advocate as people like you, for example, like who are really out there doing the work. I would say that in my, creative writing, I certainly, in my most recent book, I have disabled characters, and they're just constantly, I think, a part of my work, a part of my thinking, part of how I move through the world. So yeah, the conversations about disability are I think just kind of naturally interwoven throughout my creative work and my creative expression.
In your visual description, you said that you wear glasses. How does this change how you view wearing glasses as a visual aid for your eyes?
Mm, yes. Um, I guess I would say, my glasses are absolutely essential to being able to function and move through the world for me. I'm extremely, extremely nearsighted. So having glasses is certainly essential, yeah, to how I function in the world. I also sometimes wear contacts depending, but yeah, I cannot see without some sort of visual aid. So yes, that is something that very much affects the way I move through the world.
And with that visual aid and the relationship with your partner, what do you think you learned that stays with you on a daily basis from the disability community or a specific disabled person? And this doesn't have to be your partner.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that certainly being in kind of like an inter-abled relationship, it has really educated me about what it means to walk through the world as a disabled person and how oftentimes disabled people and their essential needs are ignored by society, are ignored. And I think it has just raised my awareness of the need to ensure that the way we move through the world is accessible to everyone. And so I think that it just made me much more sensitive to that. Yeah, and there are just ways that our relationship probably functions different than other people's relationships. Um, I I think we, as with any partnership, there's like a give and take. He's great at some things, I'm great at some things. We kind of, it's always a balance, but of course, the disability is a part of that balance as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's an interesting perspective too. Everybody's perspective is different, so we appreciate you giving yours and sharing that.
Yeah.
On to your career as a writer and an author. You are a part of a wave of writers redefining what career fiction can look like: messy, human, and not just trauma based. How do you feel the landscape of queer literature has changed since your first book?
Hmm. That is interesting. And thank you for that. That's very kind of you to say. I mean, I do, I guess I view my queer fiction as pushing the envelope. And I'm always concerned with, I think, pushing the cultural conversation, pushing conversations around social justice, pushing people's perceptions. I'm always concerned with, I think, pushing the envelope, and really also challenging people in their kind of preconceived notions of how they potentially view the world. So I hope that I can be among the queer authors who are kind of out there, um, challenging, I think, some of society's more problematic scripts, and illuminating other possibilities. So yeah.
Thank you. Are you ever concerned about pure backlash your books could bring?
Um, I mean, I think when I'm writing, I I cannot have that voice in the back of my head that's concerned about what other people might think. It's not to say I don't worry about that, but in terms of when I'm actually creating, actually writing, it's a very personal process for me, and it's one that is very internal. So when I'm creating, I try to drown out those voices. And then once I've created something and put it out into the world, that's when I can freak out and say, oh my God, is everyone going to hate me for this? But I don't think I even actually ever really worry about that because I know that whatever I've put in the book, I really believe I really stand behind. And there are always going to be people who don't like it or it's too radical for or something like that. But I just keep moving forward, and that's I think just the quality of being an artist. Not everyone is going to love what you're putting out, and especially if you're working with subject matter and content that's more provocative, which is often something I do as well.
Right. And it sort of goes back to that whole perspective thing of what we were just talking about too. You sharing your perspective and others viewing your perspective. Do you think the publishing world is truly ready for all the layers of queer stories, or are we still fighting to prove that our stories can sell, especially with the book bans?
Hmm. I mean, the book bans are awful, but I think that I don't know. I think, look, publishing is like any culture industry, in that there are always going to be barriers for people who are in marginalized communities, as there are across, any industry and within capitalism, quite frankly. That being said, though, I personally have been very fortunate, and have found editors, publishers that are open to telling queer stories. I was never, I mean, my books are again very provocative, really push the envelope in terms of subject matter, in terms of ideas. I mean, I'm probably as far left as you can get. And thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't experienced any pushback from publishers. Obviously, book bans are a different kind of issue, um, and they are horrific, and I think they speak to a real backsliding in terms of social progress in our country. But thankfully, I have been able to publish fairly freely what I want. That being said, I don't think anybody in the GOP is going to be picking up a copy of my book, and if they are, they will probably be absolutely horrified by what they find within it. But I have been fortunate, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been out. I didn't. It's been I sold the book, my most recent book. My most recent book came out last year, but I sold it the year prior to that. So I don't know what the marketplace looks like right now. I mean, I don't know if there's a kind of conservative tightening in the wake of Trump. I'm not really sure because I haven't been out there with a book trying to sell it at this particular moment. But I'm hopeful that there are people out there always who are interested in voices from communities that are marginalized, especially in a time like the time we're living through today.
Certainly. What made you decide to do traditional publishing over self-publishing? I've been thinking about switching to traditional.
Mm. Yes, I mean, well, I think what's great about self-publishing is that it democratizes the publishing process. And I think that, there are a lot of, I think, success stories that come out of self-publishing these days because, again, it's democratizing access to the ability to publish. I think that publishing with a traditional large publisher or a smaller independent press, I mean, the advantage is using their resources in terms of marketing and publicity and getting your book into bookstores and distribution, things like that. So there are pros and cons to, I think, all of it. But, I will say that I think self-publishing has democratized publishing in a way, and is a way to put your work out in the world, regardless of whether you engage with the traditional, um, uh, whether you engage with the kind of the traditional publishing industry.
Hmm. Right. Our books actually came out the same year, 2021. And to my surprise, we explored similar themes from different angles. Mine dealt with male sexual assault, and yours dove deeper into male sex trafficking. Where did that idea come from, and what made you want to tell that story?
Yes, I mean, I think it was at the time, um, the Me Too movement had just really, it was really kind of in the zeitgeist. Unfortunately, I feel like we're now in almost like a backlash to Me Too, which is horrific. But I think for me, I wanted to create just a space in our cultural conversation, as I know that you did as well, for conversations around sexual assault amongst queer people. Because I think for the most part, the vast majority of the Me Too movement and all of the stories and publicity around it, while it's so incredibly important, did tend to mainly focus on cis women and cis white women. Um, and so I think that um, any efforts to kind of diversify people's imaginations in terms of um, who they can imagine as victims of sexual assault um, is necessary work because you know I think that there are so many communities that experience sexual assault, and I feel like it's important to also um, champion those voices and hear those stories.
I agree. The stories about the male victims are so stigmatized, and it's interesting to explore how male victims, regardless of sexuality, rarely speak out. Writing something that heavy can take a toll. How did the process affect you emotionally while you were working on it?
Hmm. Yes, I mean, it is certainly very heavy to um, write those scenes. I also think I did so much research as well, which was also a pretty heavy research to do um, in terms of exploring stories of sexual assault. And I think that, it was difficult to write, certainly. But at the same time, I think that, it's worth the effort that goes into it because you create a story that people can identify with. I've had so many people reach out to me who've identified with many different aspects of the story, one of which being sexual assault. And so I think that it's valuable work, it's worth doing. But at the same time, I mean, I also teach writing, and I always tell my students, first and foremost, if you're dealing with subject matter that's difficult, and if it's subject matter that relates personally to you, I think it's always important to find a balance in terms of how far you're willing to go into that painful material that you can relate to, and making sure that you're ready to explore that area and it's not re-traumatizing or hurtful. So yeah, it's always kind of a question I think that many writers who deal with difficult subjects um, have. I'm writing my new novel that I'm writing right now. Um, is It's my third book. It's autofictional, but I had to step away from it for a minute because I was kind of unpacking issues that were happening kind of real time in my life, things that were very personal to me. And I realized that I needed space. I couldn't quite go there yet. And also I think I needed distance in order to process and render it in a compelling way on the page. Um, it was too fresh, and I did not have enough perspective, I think. You always need perspective if you're writing about something personal, and if you don't have enough space from it, it can also just hurt your writing, in addition to hurting you.
Yeah, how did you come up with the main character, Jonah, for the book?
Mm. Um, I mean, he is kind. The book is not autobiographical. I will say that. Um, this is my first book, yes, Daddy. But the character, there are certain aspects of him that certainly mirror who I was in that time period in New York City. I think I pulled a lot from my early 20s in New York. I was very lost. I was dating a lot of older, wealthy, semi-famous, at least within the culture industries, men. And I was very lost. And so I think part of the goal of the novel was to kind of explore in my own mind kind of um, the ways in which I was lost in my 20s and kind of grapple with that. Um, and so Jonah is definitely a fictional character. It is not me. However, I think he does serve as a sort of uh, proxy almost for my consciousness, my perspective.
Hmm. Was any of the responses to the book surprising to you?
I will say, out of all the things, because again, it obviously deals with very provocative subject matter. I would say the thing that triggered people that I didn't expect was part of the narrator's healing journey I mean, part of his trauma, that is a foundational trauma, is is his the fact that he grew up in an evangelical church. Um, and I think there's so much religious trauma, and so many queer people can relate to that religious trauma. He also goes through conversion therapy. And finally, he as an this is a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read, but finally there is an at the end of the book, he kind of comes full circle and finds a very queer friendly, very progressive Christian church that helps him find healing because he still holds a belief in God, but he wants to completely disconnect from the toxicity of the evangelical church and all the trauma he experienced. So he finds a very kind of radical leftist queer church where everyone is fully accepted, queer, trans, people are fully embraced. And people were bothered by that, which surprised me because I thought that I think some queer people are just so traumatized by the idea of religion that all religion in their minds is awful. Um, and again, I think the part of the work I was trying to do is suggest that for people who still want a relationship with God but want to disconnect it from toxic ideology that's traumatizing, there is a path. That who has the right to say that God is homophobic? Get out of here. That's nuts. And so there are people reclaiming religion. Um, Many people, there are many communities like this across the country. So I was surprised, but some queer people really, I think, and I can understand it also. It's like have such a their guards really go up when it comes to the church. But I hope that I could also. I know there were a lot of people who also read that and felt seen in that they were able to have a relationship with God that wasn't um, toxic after they had experienced trauma. So you know, you never know what people are really going to react to.
And I appreciated that perspective because I made my character atheist. I'm a Christian and I have a relationship with God, but I also remember reading the reviews and was also surprised.
Mm, yes.
As a queer writer, how do you balance writing for yourself versus writing for the audience that might not, air quote, get it?
Mm. Again, I think it goes back to the idea I'm not thinking of my audience when I write. I mean, obviously, I have an awareness that this is something that I would like to be published, but I really go for it in terms of okay, these are issues that matter to me. These are stories that I find compelling and vital. This is something that I personally would like to see in the world, and I think I have a real commitment to that and a real commitment to my own perspective, my own narrative voice. Where I start to feel anxiety is when it comes time to sell the book because I'm like, oh my God, is this too radical? Is this too crazy? Is this pushing too many buttons, too many envelopes? And how will the market respond um, to that? Again, knock on wood, so far the market has responded well. But but it is when it comes that's when the nerves set in because I'm not writing books that are widely palatable or easy reading. Um, I write books that are challenging and provocative.
Yeah. Yeah. I was lucky enough to receive an advanced review copy of your new book, It's Not the End of the World, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The themes feel very different from Yes, Daddy, but it's still such a deeply moving story. And I'm so sorry it took me literally all year to finally read it. Tell me about
It's
this
fine.
story.
It's a long book.
Tell me about this story and what it's about and what inspired you to write it.
Hmm. Yes. So it's about a gay couple. Um, uh, it's set in the near future, and it's about a gay couple that refuse to cancel their baby shower, even as a potentially apocalyptic event wipes out Los Angeles. And I think the initial impulse was to satirize people who are so blind to their own privilege, that they believe that they are invincible from
Mhm.
these forces that you know can bring about great disaster. Um, so I think that was the initial impulse, but I also really wanted to just explore the idea of queer families, how they're created, how they can be created, um, how queer people have the opportunity to potentially create new scripts around how families are created. And I think that the two protagonists have a very kind of assimilationist traditional idea of what they would like their family to look like. And then through a big twist in the center of the novel, that's really turned on its head. Um, and they're forced to rethink how they might want to define and structure a family. Um,
Mhm.
and I think, when you're thinking about children, you never really think about the future. So it felt like when I'm setting a novel in the near future, exploring ideas of future, what better way to do that than through exploring the idea of people having a child? Because having a child is a statement of your faith in the future, and also forces you inevitably to imagine the future and imagine the future life of your child.
I've never heard it said like that. Imagining the future life of your child, certainly, but imagining a future where you want to put a child into it. What inspired you to write the book? Is it are you where are you at in life with that topic?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not having children anytime soon. Neither me nor my partner. I think we're pretty much aligned on that. I love kids, though. I love kids, though. Um, but I think, moreover, the book is set in a very near future, grounded dystopia. It takes place in 2044. And it's not like there's some crazy event that's changed life on Earth as we know it for everyone, but rather it is I would say, realistic projection of where we might be based on where we currently are in our modern American moment. And I think for me, that was just about engaging the very real anxieties I feel, and I feel like so many people feel, just living as a human being in the year 2026. And so for me, by projecting myself, my consciousness into the future in the creation of this novel, I think I was able to engage with those anxieties and ask myself questions. And yeah, I think my therapist once uh, reminded me that um, anxiety only gets worse if you try to ignore it or push it away or repress it.
Mhm.
Um, and that, in fact, by confronting it, that's the only way to really de-escalate anxiety. Because the more you repress it, the more it builds up within you. So I think this was also just an attempt to de-escalate my anxiety about my worries about the future of our country and the world.
Have you had any experiences with anybody that you know or don't know who have had an effect, whose reading your book has had an effect on their lives?
Oh, I mean, sure. I think, I read through messages, through comments. I feel like many people have been moved by the story. I think it also introduced concepts and ideas about queer family that I think challenged a lot of people. Some people really push back against those, but some people also, I think, open their mind to new possibilities. And I think that I love when people just love the book, but I love when people are like, wow, you actually opened my mind up to a whole new avenue of thought. I think that is the most valuable response that I get to my books.
Sometimes a lot of main characters get the bulk of the attention. Are there any character arcs or any characters from the book that you feel most drawn to?
Hmm. Well, um, I think Claudia, who is the girlfriend of the couple's surrogate, um, she's the one who comes with a lot of kind of radical ideas about how to restructure family, about how to restructure societies, and eventually those really become essential. So I think she's kind of like the heart of the novel. And then Mason, the main character, it's he is kind of a dark figure, I would say, but I also find him compelling. I wanted to have a really flawed um, main character that you're not necessarily rooting for. But I wanted to make him human. I didn't want to just make him like a cartoon villain. And so Mason, I think, is a compelling character in that he is not a sympathetic, um, I guess, lead to the story. But I think that's where the satire gets a lot of its bite, is that I think the novel has a real sharp perspective on kind of critiquing his positions of privilege, and what he chooses to do with that privilege.
How bad did your anxiety get while writing this book?
Good question. I don't know if it's I don't know that it helped it grow. I mean, I will say, I don't know. The research involved was dark. I mean, again, I'm researching current issues and then projecting them into the future, climate change, social justice, all of these, the crumbling of democracy in our country. These are all things that I researched in depth. So maybe it grew my anxiety, but again, I think it was helpful for me to think about this and also imagine a future. Because I think at the heart of the novel, there's kind of the question of like, how do we find hope even when it feels like the world is ending? And then also, I did a lot of research into past social justice movements, past injustices. There's this kind of Margaret Atwood quote. I mentioned this enough. I should just find uh, the actual quote, but something like when she imagines the future in dystopian futures, she always essentially takes things that have happened in the past and imagines them and reinterprets them and imagining them in the future. Because history, of course,
Mm.
repeats itself.
Hmm.
And so I kind of use that same rule, in terms of grounding my own projections, of what might our world might look like in 2044. But when you're looking into the past and you're doing research into the past, you realize that there are so many groups of people who have been marginalized, who have struggled, who have felt like the world is ending for them throughout history. And so I think I found hope in their stories, although many of those stories are obviously very tragic, that people have always felt like their backs are up against the wall, like the world was ending. And yet they persisted and pursued justice.
Yeah. Well, one thing interesting about the book that really stood out with "It's Not the End of the World" was your choice to use timestamps as the as the chapter subtitles. I found myself paying attention to the pacing and emotional rhythm differently because of it. It's not told in so many different places between the past and current events in the book. What made you decide to structure the book this way, and what are you hoping readers would feel or notice through those timestamps?
Yeah. So the first third of the book, um, I wanted it all to take place on the day of this disaster. And yet, I also wanted to show all of the things leading up to this that happened personally within this gay couple's lives. So I wanted it all to be on the day of the baby shower, but then I also wanted us to understand where this couple was coming from. So it flashes between the present storyline and then also then their past. And so the timestamps really, I mean, it adds kind of a ticking clock because the timestamps are counting down to zero. The reader doesn't know what the zero is. But it's kind of this huge central turning point, central twist in the novel, that it's leading up to. And then everything in the novel kind of changes after that. Um, but it also, I think, was helpful to orient the readers to where we are in time because I did have so many flashbacks to that story in the past to show us the couple's history. So I think it served to kind of as a narrative pacing device, but it also, I think, just practically orients the reader to where we are in time in a narrative that jumps back and forth.
Hmm. What do you hope people get from reading the book in general?
I think what I was saying before about kind of opening people up to new avenues of thought, new ideas about how we can better care for each other, new ideas about how to form family, new ideas about how to move through a world that is rife with hate and discrimination. Yeah, I think that's really what I hope. I mean, I always hope that my books can open people's minds and open people's hearts and open people to new paths of thinking.
Yeah, I think just hitting them the topic of new forms of family. It's love is love, and family is family. And so being able to raise or support a child is looks so many different ways for so many different people. So I love that you hit on that in the book, and it's such an important topic. It's just I love how we're sticking with the perspectives of the conversation here, moving through your personal life as an author and playwright, but also within your characters too. B-
Yes.
Both novels feature queer protagonists who feel both liberated and haunted. What draws you to that tension?
Hmm. I think, having queer protagonists. Um, Wait, you said what were the two qualities? Sorry.
Yeah, liberated and haunted.
Yes. Um, yeah, I think that's very interesting. That's a good observation. I think I want always to create queer characters that are very complex and not perfect. Um, and I think some of these queer characters are, like you're saying, very liberated. They have ideas that are very progressive, very forward thinking. There are also queer people that are haunted by trauma, by capitalism, by um, a desire, I think, to assimilate. So yeah, I never want to settle for just kind of, I think, queer characters that feel kind of cheery and bright and simple and like cardboard paper cutouts. I always want to create really complex characters and queer characters that aren't always sympathetic because I think it's always better to have nuanced representation rather than make queer people into some sort of false paragons of virtue who are all perfect and shiny and behave in perfect ways. I think that's not how everyone operates. So I think it's really about honoring people's humanity and complexity.
Yeah. And do you always empathize with your characters, or do you find yourself hating some of them?
Hey, oh, sure, certainly hating some of them. Yes, I mean there are people who do pretty awful things in my books. But I mean, I think what also is important is even the people doing awful things, I want to make them feel like human beings who are doing awful things rather than again kind of straw men or one-dimensional villains. I It's important to me that even people who do awful things are revealed as human because people
Mhm.
who do awful things are human, and I think that the key to rooting out why people do awful things is always rooted in their very human story.
Do you ever have real life conversations in your books? Do you use characters as your interpersonal real life conversations or topics within your books? Do you ever
I
use that to get anything out?
I mean, I think no, I mean, I'll never like transport exact dialogue from my life into a book, but certainly there are things I've talked about with my friends or issues I've come up against that then get repurposed into the novel. And I also find that, when I'm creating characters, it helps me um, if the character has a kernel of of someone I know in real life. It helps me kind of like imagine like I take a little seed, I take like a small part of someone that I know, kind of plant it and then grow a new character. But I think it's helpful for me to kind of base these characters in aspects of people that I know, or they become composites of people that I know. Again, never
Mhm.
actually using anyone's identity, but I think it always helps me at least if I'm reaching towards an actual human being that I know in terms of developing
Oh,
a character.
yeah, sort of like a way of catharsis almost.
Yeah.
Awesome. As a non-disabled person, how do you feel about writing the disabled characters or characters you don't necessarily relate to? Because I try to I'm sorry, because I try to write characters that I don't relate to as much because I prefer creating them from scratch than by reference.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when writing across any sort of lines of identity, there's always, I suppose, the risk of quote unquote getting it wrong. But I don't think you can get it wrong if this person is a real human being. Obviously, it's also helpful to have someone again, as I said, I have someone in mind for all these characters that are very personal to me. And so I think starting with their humanity versus starting with an idea of what they are quote unquote supposed to be based on their identity, because no one is, everyone's a human being. I think starting with their humanity, but also I think depicting people that you have naturally in your life, in your milieu, is going to help you in terms of painting portraits of people that feel real and true and deep. Um, and so for me, it's always about who is organically in my world, and I think that's where I start in terms of the characters that you see in my books.
Awesome. That's Thank you for your insight on your books and how you write your characters. I really appreciate that.
Oh,
We're going to move on now to the Big Gay Jamboree. Tell
oh,
me what
sure.
that's about. How did that start? What's your role? For
Yeah,
those
so
who don't
it's
know.
a musical. I co-wrote the book, which is like the script, and with a good friend of mine, Marla Mandel. And I co-wrote, and then she co-wrote the music with our other good friend, Philip Drennan. It was directed by our other good friend, Connor Gallagher. And I mean, I just love the show. It's very different from my novels. It's hard comedy, but I think it's still provocative. It pushes the envelope. It's about a woman who wakes up on stage in the middle of the musical with no idea how she got there, and she's locked in the theater and has to figure out her way out. So it's definitely a comedy. There's a lot of huge production numbers. It was so much fun to create. It started as a screenplay that my writing partner and I uh, wrote and sold to Paramount Pictures. It entered development hell in Hollywood. It never got made, but it was produced by Margot Robbie, the actress, and her production company. And years after we sold it, probably over 10 years after we sold it, Margot saw a play that Marla, um, my collaborator, starred in and wrote called Titanic. It's now going to Broadway. Um, but Margot came to that, absolutely was obsessed with it, and was like, "Oh, can I help you in any way? I'd love to help you on your next project." And then at the time, we just so happened to be rewriting this script that we sold years ago as a stage musical. And so she signed on as a producer. We had another Broadway producers, Wagner Johnson Productions, that signed on. And then, yeah, we premiered off Broadway. It was a very quick process for the theater. We premiered off Broadway kind of about a year out from when we started developing it with them, with the producers. And yeah, it was so much fun.
How would you say it's similar or different to writing a novel?
Very different than writing a novel because a novel is a very solitary act. And you're just spending a lot of time, as you know, by yourself at your computer. Eventually I engage my agent, I engage, whatever editor has bought it. There are people obviously you engage with and collaborate with along the way. Um, but but theater, you have a whole cast, you have a lighting crew, you have lighting designers, scenic designers, projection designers, sound designers, an orchestra, an arranger, the actors on stage. It's making this is there are so many people involved in making it the thing that it is, and that's something that's really fun, and that's why I do love theater is because of that collaborative element, especially when I've been sitting in my room all day by myself writing a novel. It was nice to kind of have a different experience and really collaborate. And we were so lucky. I mean, everyone we hired for that, we just really loved. So it was nice to be working with so many talented people who all had kind of the same also vibe. The vibes were just good.
Hmm. What was the experience during the run like, just being in that environment versus something like a book tour per se?
Oh yeah, I mean, again, the book tour is a piece of cake. You already wrote the book. You're just showing up to bookstores, doing a little reading, signing some books. That's great. I mean, with theater, when you're starting performances, like there's a process called the preview process. So every night you're performing, the show is being performed for an audience full of people, and you're making changes after every performance based on audience reactions or things that are working or not working in the performances. So it's kind of it feels pretty high stakes because you're crafting the show kind of live in front of an audience night after night. Then after that process, which I think was about 2 weeks, maybe three, then the show is opens. The reviews come out, and then after opening night, the show is locked. And so that's when, as creators, you kind of step back and the show just goes on without you, and your baby is out in the world. I mean, there are the director, the assistant director, the assistant choreographer. They'll check in, they'll make sure the show is staying clean and things are moving along as they should. But in terms of like writing the book, like my job is pretty much done after opening night. Um, so that's kind of how it differs. It's a very different, yeah, different process.
Have you done a book tour? I don't remember seeing you do one yet.
Oh yeah, I did one for It's Not the End of the World. I mean, Yes, Daddy, my first book came out during the pandemic, so it was mainly, I mean, everyone was just doing Zoom. So I did a few Zoom events then. But then I did physical book tour this year. I went to New York, LA, San Francisco, Palm Springs, Aspen, and Aspen.
Oh, fun. Oh, I love Aspen. Love all those places. How do you see queer storytelling shifting between page, stage, and screen? Do you think some stories belong to one medium more than another? Or a less controversial way to answer that is, do you see stories having an effect on a different medium?
Yeah, I mean, I think any story can be told in any medium. I mean, I don't think there are certain stories that are better suited for any one medium over the other. I think it's just like what form makes the most sense for what you hope the work of uh, piece of this cultural artifact will do in the world, I guess.
And who
Uh,
overreach?
yeah, totally. It's just really they're just such different art forms. So again, I think it's really just but it's not like there's certain stories that should be told in one or another. I think it's truly just um what is the most satisfying medium for the story you want to tell.
Back to the book tour. If you ever do a stop in St. Louis, please let me know. I'll make
Oh my
sure
God,
and
of
come in.
course. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
What projects, whether it be books or otherwise, are you working on next? I'll always be ready.
Yes, I'm currently working on my third novel, um, and I'm also working on a new musical with the same collaborators as I was before. Um, yeah, so those are kind of the two big ones that I'm currently uh, working on right now.
Very exciting. Was there anything else you wanted to add or discuss today that we didn't touch on, or do you have any questions for me?
I think we covered it all. I just thank you so much for having me on. You are a fantastic host and interviewer.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you sticking around. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. You are definitely one of my favorite writers, and I hope you will return when you publish the next one. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their time and insights. Before we wrap up, if folks want to connect with you or support your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram at JP Rampage or just search for my name on the app. And thank you so much for having me on and for all your brilliant questions and insightful thoughts.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. I'll make sure everything is linked in the description below. Once again, I'm Sean Gold. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. And make sure to hit the bell so you're notified when the new episode of Crippled by Culture go live. See you next time.
Want to listen to Crippled by Culture on your favorite podcast platform? Well, now you can. Crippled by Culture is now available wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search up the show title and make sure you subscribe. Thank you for being a listener.